The Dolby Theater, March 10th, 2024. A cathedral of glass and gold. Lights flare like divine judgment. The entire industry rises. Robert Downey Jr. walks to the stage. Applause detonates. Thunder, worship, absolution. He holds the Oscar for Oppenheimer, Best Supporting Actor. A career resurrection sealed in gold. The camera lingers. His smile is royal, measured, almost amused. He wears the posture of a man who has already lived his ending. The crowd knows the headline. The highest paid actor of his generation. The man who built Marvel. The king who came back from extinction. Hollywood bows. Nolan applauds. Cillian beams. The theater baptizes him in adoration. This is triumph. This is immortality. And then, silence. Corcoran State Prison, 1999. A fluorescent flicker, a metal sink, steam rising from industrial pans. Inmate P-1001 scrubs crusted lasagna for 8 cents an hour. No applause, no Armani tux, no franchise waiting on him. Just the clang of trays, bleach, sweat, a number stitched where his name used to live. He was officially declared uninsurable. Studios wouldn't touch him. Agents abandoned him. Everyone assumed he was done. This wasn't the prelude to a comeback. This was a burial. Here, Robert Downey Jr. ceased being Robert Downey Jr. He wasn't Iron Man. He wasn't genius. He wasn't beloved. He was a cautionary tale, a repeat offender, a ghost the system expected to disappear. 8 cents an hour. Scrub, rinse, repeat. Hollywood crowned him its king in 2024, but in 1999 it threw him away. 2 lives, 2 deaths, 1 man. And so the thesis emerges. To become the hero the world needed, he first had to survive the monster his father created. This is the story of the man who died twice and learned how to come back. Before Robert Downey Jr. destroyed himself, someone taught him how. Not on purpose, not with malice, but with love warped beyond recognition. New York City, 1971. A 6-year-old boy sits beside his father on a couch. Robert Downey Sr., underground filmmaker, rebel artist, cultural renegade. The man critics called a beautiful disaster. He reaches into his jacket and hands his son the first joint of his life. Age 6. Downey Jr. would later describe it with the saddest clarity. It was the only way he knew how to express his love. In that moment, affection fused with intoxication. Comfort became escape. Safety became altered states. The chemistry of addiction wasn't formed in a nightclub, but in a living room under paternal supervision. His home was an art scene built on chaos, the downtown counterculture, Warhol circles, avant-garde filmmakers, and cocaine carpets. At 5, he was on sets. At 7, he was in his first film. By adolescence, Downey wasn't learning discipline. He was learning detachment, dissociation, performance over presence. He grew up surrounded by brilliant dysfunction, creativity without control, freedom without boundaries, intelligence without stability. Hollywood later called him enigmatic. Psychologists call it something else, attachment confusion. When your father teaches you that love equals intoxication, how do you ever learn sobriety? The 1980s. The Brat Pack ascension. Handsome, sharp, magnetic. Trained by chaos, Downey thrived in an industry built on it. He wasn't just good, he was frighteningly good. Saturday Night Live, Less Than Zero, Chaplin. He could mimic anyone because he still didn't know who he was. Casting directors saw brilliance. Friends saw volatility. But behind the rising star was a boy still looking for the father who taught him intimacy through impairment. Hollywood celebrated him, but his childhood had programmed him for self-destruction. Success on the outside, rotting on the inside. To love meant to lose control. To feel meant to numb. To belong meant to disappear. And so the spiral began. A genius becoming an addict. A prince becoming unstable. A career becoming a warning. The 1990s. The genius versus the addict. Downey entered the decade as one of the most electrifying actors alive. He could improvise Shakespeare one moment and unravel emotionally the next. Directors called him brilliant, but privately whispered another word: unstable. His performance in Chaplin was so transcendent that Richard Attenborough said watching him was like seeing the real man resurrected. He earned Oscar nominations, standing ovations, critical worship. And yet, Robert Downey Jr. would later admit he was often high while filming. He wasn't escaping pressure. He was maintaining identity. Sobriety was terrifying because sobriety was unfamiliar. But let's pause here. We need to understand the texture of this collapse. It wasn't just headlines. It was a daily, suffocating reality inside his home. Imagine the year 1991. Sarah Jessica Parker is holding the chaotic pieces of his life together. She is the anchor. He is the storm. He comes home from the set of Chaplin wearing the costume of the greatest silent film star in history. He has spent 12 hours perfectly mimicking the movements of a genius, convincing the world he is in control. But the moment the door closes, the performance drops. The silence of the house is terrifying to him. Silence demands introspection, and introspection reveals the void. So the noise begins. The drugs aren't a party anymore. They are medicine. He uses them to dial down the static in his head. Sarah finds him in the bathroom, or the closet, or passed out on the sofa. She cleans him up. She covers for him. She loves him with a desperation that breaks her own heart. She later said, "I believed I was the person who could keep him whole." But addiction is a selfish lover. It demands monogamy. Robert had to choose, the woman who represented life or the substance that represented escape. He didn't want to choose the darkness, but his wiring was corrupted. One night, she stops fighting. She packs her bags. The sound of that zipper closing was louder than any explosion in an Iron Man movie. It was the sound of his last safety net snapping. When she walked out the door, she didn't just leave a boyfriend. She left a man who was already drowning. He stood in that empty hallway, realizing that his genius could win awards, but it couldn't make someone stay. The question wasn't whether he would fall. It was how far and how violently. And the answer was coming. Corcoran State Prison, Inmate P-1001, the abyss waiting with open arms. There is a point where addiction stops being tragic and starts becoming mathematical. For Robert Downey Jr., that moment arrived in 1999. Welcome to Corcoran State Prison, not rehab, not celebrity jail, one of California's most violent correctional facilities, a place where serial killers served time, where riots were routine, where Robert Downey Jr. was stripped of everything except a number. Time changes shape in prison. In Hollywood, time is money. In Corcoran, time is the enemy. Let's walk through 24 hours in the life of Inmate P-1001. 5 a.m. The lights buzz on. Not a sunrise, but a harsh industrial fluorescent flicker that stings the eyes. The smell hits you first. It's a specific cocktail of industrial disinfectant, stale body odor, and fear. Robert wakes up on a thin mattress. His back aches. The cold seeped into his bones during the night. Roll call. He stands by the bars. He doesn't look at the guards. He doesn't look at the other prisoners. He has learned the 1,000-yard stare, looking at everything and nothing at the same time. If you make eye contact, it's a challenge. If you look down, it's submission. You have to look through. Breakfast. A tray slides through a slot. Rubber eggs, tepid water. He eats quickly, shielding his food with his arm. This is instinct now. The man who dined at Nobu now guards a piece of dry toast like it's gold bullion. Then the work begins. The kitchen duty, the pans. The water is scalding hot. The grease is thick and black. He plunges his hands in. The steel wool tears at his skin. Scrub, rinse, for hours. Yard time. The sun is out, but it feels different here. It shines on concrete, reflecting heat. He walks the perimeter, in a circle, always in a circle. Other inmates recognize him. Some mock him. "Hey, movie star, where's your limo?" He says nothing. He keeps walking. He realizes that Robert Downey Jr. is a character he used to play. That character is dead. Only P100522 remains. Night falls. The cell door slams shut with a sound that vibrates in your teeth. Lights out. This is the hardest part. The noise of the cell block, shouting, weeping, threats, eventually dies down. And in the dark, the cravings come. They claw at his stomach. His brain screams for dopamine. He curls into a ball, shivering, waiting for the 5 a.m. buzzer to start the cycle all over again. He later described prison like this: "It's like I have a shotgun in my mouth, and I've got my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of the gunmetal." Rock bottom wasn't pain, it was numbness. When he was released, Hollywood didn't celebrate. They crossed his name off lists, stamped him with the industry's harshest label, uninsurable. Robert Downey Jr. walked out of prison not reborn, but erased. He stepped into exile. The same industry that once called him the next Pacino now called him a liability. For a man whose entire identity had once been belonging, rejection was its own sentence. One man refused to look away, Mel Gibson. He had seen something others didn't, a soul worth saving. So when producers insisted Downey cannot be insured, Gibson did something unheard of. He paid Robert's insurance bond personally. The message was simple: you're not done yet. But even with that miracle, Robert Downey Jr. still had to fight the most dangerous opponent of all, himself. The ocean, the burger, the breaking point, the coast. Downey sits alone in his car overlooking the Pacific Ocean, fast food in his hand, a greasy Burger King meal. He takes a bite. The taste is awful. Something about the moment cracks him open. The emptiness of his life, the destroyed relationships, the wasted years, the endless cycles of relapse collides with this ordinary bite of cold, cheap food. It becomes the perfect metaphor. This is what his life had become: processed, stale, empty. He opens his car door, walks to the shoreline, reaches into his pocket, and throws his remaining drugs into the ocean. This was not dramatic. It wasn't staged. No one was filming it. Just a broken man finally choosing to stop breaking. Later he described it simply: "I reached a point where I didn't want to die anymore." Hollywood didn't save Robert Downey Jr. A woman did. A producer, a skeptic, a force of nature wrapped in discipline and quiet fire, Susan Levin. It's 2003. Downey lands a minor role in the film Gothica. Susan is one of the producers. Sharp, focused, respected. Downey notices her immediately. She notices him too, but not the way most people did. Where others saw charisma and charm, she saw something broken. He asked her out. She said no. But Downey had learned something in prison: patience. He didn't push. He showed up. On time, sober, consistent. One day, she said yes. Susan wasn't blinded by fame. She laid down one rule: if we're going to be together, you must stay clean. Not a request, a boundary. She became the first person in his life who didn't love him despite the chaos. She loved him enough to refuse it. Marriage, a real home, a life not built on applause but on accountability. But destiny wasn't finished. Because while Susan stabilized the man, another gamble was about to resurrect the myth, the fight for Iron Man. Before the miracle could happen, there was the test, the most important audition in the history of modern cinema, and Robert Downey Jr. was terrified. Marvel didn't want him. They had a list of safe actors: Tom Cruise, Clive Owen, Nicolas Cage, men with clean records. Jon Favreau had to beg the studio executives just to let Robert read for the part. They agreed, but with a condition. He gets no special treatment. If he messes up once, he's out. The day of the screen test. A soundstage in Los Angeles. Robert arrives early. He is wearing a suit. He looks sharp, but look closely at his hands. They are trembling slightly. He knows this is it. There is no plan B. He walks into the room. A camera. 3 executives with crossed arms, looking skeptical. They expect the addict. They expect the liability. Robert takes a breath. He closes his eyes for a second. He thinks of the prison cell. He thinks of the Burger King by the ocean. He thinks of Susan. And then he switches on. He doesn't just read the lines. He attacks them. He infuses Tony Stark with his own arrogance, his own pain, his frantic rapid-fire intelligence. He improvises. He dances around the script. He looks into the camera lens with a mixture of ego and vulnerability that you cannot fake. In the room, the atmosphere shifts. The executives uncross their arms. They lean forward. They stop seeing the inmate. They start seeing the genius. For 20 minutes, Robert Downey Jr. channels every mistake he ever made and turns it into charisma. When he finishes, there is a beat of silence. He straightens his tie. He smiles, that half smile we all know now. Was that okay? He asks. It wasn't just okay, it was electric. He didn't just get the job, he saved the studio. Iron Man wasn't a movie. It was resurrection. Downey wasn't acting. He was confessing. Tony Stark's arc mirrored his own. A self-destructive man saved not by power, but by accountability, humility, and love. Iron Man exploded. The MCU was born. And the industry that once called him a lost cause now called him the most bankable actor in modern history. But every resurrection has a cost, and every hero has a wound. To understand the legacy, we must return to the source, to the father who taught him how to fall long before Hollywood tried to raise him. There is a strange kind of symmetry in Robert Downey Jr.'s story. The same man who almost destroyed himself became the face of redemption for an entire generation. But the final act of his life was not in front of cameras. It was in a hospital room, in a documentary called simply SR. Robert Downey Sr., the man who introduced chaos, addiction, distortion, and blurred boundaries, was dying. Downey Jr. could have walked away. He had every reason to. Instead, he walked toward him, sat beside him, talked with him, filmed him. Not to expose the wounds, but to understand them. In Seer, Downey doesn't confront his father, he sees him. A man who didn't know how to love except through escape. A man who passed down poison because it was the only currency he knew. And somewhere between camera setups, old reels, and final breaths, Downey forgave him. Not with words, but with presence. The greatest plot twist wasn't that Downey became Iron Man. It was that he learned how to break the cycle. March 2024. The Dolby Theater rises to its feet. Applause, tears, triumph. He wins the Oscar for Oppenheimer. But look at his face. It's not pride, it's peace. Because the award wasn't validation, it was punctuation. A sentence completed, a life rewritten. A man the world once called uninsurable, a danger, finished, now stands as evidence that it is never too late to rewrite your story. Robert Downey Jr. didn't just come back. He died spiritually, psychologically, socially, and came back new. He became what his younger self never had, a stable father, a devoted husband, A man who doesn't need chaos to feel alive. His legacy isn't Iron Man. It's proof. Proof that monsters can be tamed, traumas can be metabolized, and the hero you become has nothing to do with where you began. I used to think the story was about surviving. Now I think it's about surrendering. Downey mined the hardest truth of all. The past is real, but it is not final. And that is why his comeback matters. Because somewhere, someone is watching, broken, lost, convinced their story is over. Downey stands on that stage, gold in his hand, decades of ashes behind him, and says without words, "It's never too late to rewrite your ending."